The scorching Afghanistan sun beat down mercilessly on Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez as he led his patrol through the dusty streets of Kandahar province. The 28-year-old Marine from Texas had been deployed for 8 months, and the weight of responsibility for his 12-man squad pressed heavily on his shoulders. Every step they took could be their last in this war-torn landscape, where danger lurked behind every corner. Marcus had joined the Marines straight out of high school, driven by a deep sense of duty and patriotism that ran through his family like blood through veins. His grandfather had served in World War II, his father in Vietnam, and now it was his turn to carry the torch of service. But nothing could have prepared him for the harsh realities of modern warfare in Afghanistan, where the enemy was invisible and every civilian could potentially be a threat. The patrol was supposed to be routine, a standard sweep through a village that intelligence had marked as clear. But Marcus had learned long ago that nothing was ever routine in this place. His instincts, honed by months of combat experience, kept him alert as they moved through the narrow alleyways between mud brick houses. The silence was too perfect, the streets too empty for a typical afternoon. As they rounded a corner near the village outskirts, Marcus heard something that made him raise his fist, signaling his squad to halt. It wasn't the sound of gunfire or explosions that he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, it was something far more unusual in this desolate place, the faint whimpering of an animal in distress. His squad members exchanged puzzled glances, their weapons ready but their expressions questioning. Following the sound, Marcus led his team toward an abandoned compound that showed signs of recent bombing. The building's walls were partially collapsed, creating a maze of rubble and debris. The whimpering grew louder as they approached, and Marcus realized it was coming from somewhere beneath the wreckage. His heart began to race, not from fear of combat, but from a different kind of urgency entirely. Peering through a gap in the collapsed wall, Marcus spotted movement in the shadows. What he saw made him freeze in disbelief. A large German shepherd was trapped beneath a fallen beam, her body visibly swollen with pregnancy. The dog's eyes met his through the darkness, and in that moment Marcus saw something that reminded him of home, the same desperate hope he'd seen in his own dog's eyes when she'd been hit by a car years earlier. The situation was complicated by more than just the dog's condition. The entire area around the compound was potentially booby-trapped, as insurgents often used abandoned buildings to hide explosive devices. Standard protocol would be to call in the bomb disposal unit and wait. But Marcus could see that the pregnant German shepherd was in immediate distress. Blood stained the ground around her and her breathing was labored and rapid. Corporal Jenkins, Marcus's second-in-command, approached cautiously. "Sergeant, we need to move on. Command is expecting us to complete the patrol route within the hour." Jenkins was a by-the-book Marine who rarely questioned orders, but Marcus could hear the concern in his voice. They both knew that deviating from mission parameters could have serious consequences. Marcus studied the trapped animal more carefully. The German shepherd wasn't just pregnant. She appeared to be in active labor. Her body convulsed with contractions and small whimpers escaped her muzzle with each wave of pain. The fallen beam had pinned her hind legs, making it impossible for her to move or find a safe place to give birth to her puppies. "Sir, with all due respect, we can't risk the entire squad for a dog," Jenkins whispered, though his own expression showed internal conflict. "The area hasn't been cleared for explosives, and we're already behind schedule. If command finds out we stopped for this..." Marcus understood Jenkins' concerns completely. Military regulations existed for good reasons, and protecting his men was his primary responsibility. But as he watched the struggling German shepherd, memories of his childhood flooded back. He remembered finding a stray cat with kittens behind his family's barn, how his father had helped him build a shelter and care for them until they could find homes. His mother had always said that how a person treats animals reveals their true character. The decision wasn't just about military protocol. It was about the kind of man Marcus wanted to be, the kind of Marine he wanted his squad to remember him as. He'd seen enough death and destruction in this deployment to last several lifetimes. Here was a chance to preserve life instead of taking it, to show mercy in a place where mercy was rare. "Set up a perimeter," Marcus ordered quietly. "Jenkins, get Rodriguez and Thompson to watch our 6. Martinez, you're on point watching the main road. If anyone approaches, you signal immediately." He began removing his gear, preparing to enter the unstable structure. "Sergeant, what are you doing?" Jenkins asked, though he was already moving to follow orders. Marcus looked at his squad, these young men who had followed him through countless dangerous situations. "I'm going to get her out," he said simply. "That dog is about to become a mother, and I'm not leaving her to die alone in there." The other Marines exchanged glances but began taking their positions without further question. They'd learned to trust Marcus's judgment, even when they didn't fully understand his reasoning. Private Martinez, the youngest member of their squad at just 19, seemed particularly affected by the sight of the trapped animal. As Marcus approached the collapsed structure, he noticed something else that gave him pause. Around the German Shepherd's neck was a collar, and attached to it appeared to be some kind of metal tag. This wasn't just a wild dog, she belonged to someone, or had belonged to someone before the war had torn this village apart. The implications of this discovery would prove to be far more significant than Marcus could possibly imagine at that moment. As he prepared to risk his life, and potentially his military career for a pregnant German Shepherd, he had no way of knowing that this single act of compassion would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone involved in ways that defied all explanation. Marcus carefully tested each step as he made his way through the debris-filled entrance of the collapsed building. Years of combat training had taught him to move silently, but now that skill served a different purpose entirely. The pregnant German Shepherd watched his every movement, her intelligent brown eyes tracking him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope that broke his heart. The smell inside the ruined structure was overwhelming. Dust, concrete, and something else that Marcus recognized as the metallic scent of blood. As he got closer to the trapped animal, he could see that her situation was even worse than he'd initially thought. The wooden beam that had her pinned wasn't just heavy. It was positioned in such a way that any wrong movement could cause the entire remaining structure to collapse on both of them. "Easy, girl," Marcus whispered softly, extending his hand slowly toward the dog. "I'm here to help you." The German Shepherd's ears perked up at the sound of his voice, and Marcus was surprised when she didn't growl or show signs of aggression. Instead, she seemed to understand that he meant no harm. From outside, he could hear Jenkins coordinating the security perimeter with quiet efficiency. "Rodriguez, I need you watching that ridgeline. Thompson, keep your eyes on the village center. Any movement, any sound that doesn't belong, you call it out immediately." Marcus knew his squad was risking their own safety by staying in one location for an extended period, but their loyalty to him was unwavering. As Marcus knelt beside the trapped animal, he got his first clear look at the metal tag hanging from her collar. It wasn't a typical dog tag at all. It was a military identification disc, the kind worn by soldiers. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the tag to read it in the dim light filtering through the collapsed ceiling. The words stamped into the metal made his blood run cold. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber, Bundeswehr, Germany. Below that was a German military identification number and what appeared to be a blood-type designation. Marcus stared at the tag for several long moments, his mind racing to process this unexpected discovery. This German Shepherd had belonged to a German soldier, someone from the NATO forces that were also stationed in Afghanistan. But what was she doing here, alone and pregnant, in this abandoned village? Where was Klaus Weber, and why had he left his dog behind? Marcus had heard stories of military working dogs being abandoned when units were transferred, but something about this situation felt different. The dog whimpered again, drawing Marcus's attention back to the immediate crisis. Her contractions were getting stronger and more frequent. He could see tiny movements in her swollen belly, signs that the puppies were ready to be born whether their mother was trapped or not. Time was running out for both the mother and her unborn babies. Marcus began examining the beam that had the dog pinned. It was a thick wooden support beam from the building's roof, probably weighing several hundred pounds. Lifting it alone would be impossible, but he noticed that if he could create leverage using some of the other debris, he might be able to shift it enough to free the dog's legs. "Jenkins," he called out quietly, "I need Martinez in here with me. Tell him to bring the pry bar from his pack." "Sir, is that wise? The whole place could come down," Jenkins responded, though Marcus could hear footsteps already moving toward the entrance. "We don't have a choice," Marcus replied. "She's having the puppies now, and if we don't move fast, we're going to lose them all." Private Martinez appeared at the entrance, his young face showing both fear and determination. At 19, he was the baby of their squad, but he'd proven himself in combat multiple times. What Marcus didn't know was that Martinez had grown up on a ranch in New Mexico, where helping animals give birth was just part of daily life. "Martinez, I need you to help me lift this beam," Marcus explained quickly. "But first tell me, have you ever delivered puppies before?" The young private's face lit up with surprise. "Yes, sir. My family raised German Shepherds back home. I've helped with probably a dozen litters." This revelation felt like divine intervention to Marcus. Of all the Marines in his squad, the one with the most relevant experience was right there with him. As they worked to position the pry bar, Martinez kept talking to the German Shepherd in a soothing voice, mixing English with Spanish phrases that seemed to calm her remarkably. "Tranquila, mama. We're going to get you out of here. You're going to be okay." The first attempt to lift the beam failed. The leverage wasn't quite right, and the beam barely moved an inch before settling back into place. The German Shepherd let out a sharp yelp of pain, and Marcus could see that her contractions were now coming almost continuously. "Sir," Martinez said urgently, "I can see the first puppy starting to crown. If we don't get her free in the next few minutes, we're going to have to deliver them right here while she's still trapped." Marcus felt sweat dripping down his face despite the cool air inside the ruined building. Every instinct told him to call for backup, to follow proper procedures, but there simply wasn't time. He repositioned the pry bar and tried again, this time with Martinez helping to guide the beam's movement. On the second attempt, they managed to lift the beam just enough to create a small gap. The German Shepherd, sensing her opportunity, began struggling to pull herself free. Her powerful legs, though bloodied and bruised, still had enough strength to help with the rescue effort. "That's it, girl. Come on," Marcus encouraged as the dog dragged herself clear of the beam. The moment she was free, Marcus and Martinez quickly moved her to a safer area of the building, away from the unstable debris. What happened next would remain etched in Marcus's memory for the rest of his life. The German Shepherd, despite her injuries and the trauma she just endured, immediately began the process of giving birth. Her instincts took over completely, and within minutes the first puppy appeared. Martinez's ranch experience proved invaluable as he helped clean the newborn and ensure it was breathing properly. "It's a healthy male," he announced with a grin that seemed out of place in their dangerous surroundings. The mother dog immediately began cleaning her puppy, her tail actually wagging weakly with maternal pride. But they weren't finished yet. Over the next 20 minutes, while Jenkins and the rest of the squad maintained their nervous vigil outside, 4 more puppies were born in that bombed-out building in Afghanistan. Each birth felt like a miracle, a defiant act of life in the face of so much death and destruction. As Marcus watched the German Shepherd tend to her newborn puppies, he couldn't help but wonder about Klaus Weber, the German soldier whose identification tag she still wore. Where was he now? Did he know that his dog was safe? And more importantly, how had she ended up alone in this village so far from any military base? The answers to those questions would prove to be more shocking than anything Marcus could have imagined. And they would transform his simple act of animal rescue into something far more profound and life-changing than he ever thought possible. The newly born puppies were tiny, blind, and completely helpless, but they were alive and healthy. Marcus watched in amazement as the mother German Shepherd instinctively positioned them for nursing, her injuries forgotten in the overwhelming drive to care for her babies. The sight of new life in this place of destruction moved him in ways he hadn't expected. "Sir, we really need to move," Jenkins called from outside, his voice tight with anxiety. "I just spotted movement on the ridgeline. Could be locals, could be hostiles. We've been stationary too long." Marcus knew Jenkins was right. They'd already broken protocol by staying in one location for over an hour. Every minute they remained increased the risk of enemy contact or IED discovery. But looking at the exhausted mother dog and her 5 newborn puppies, he couldn't bring himself to abandon them now. "Martinez, can they be moved safely?" Marcus asked. The young private examined the puppies carefully, his ranch background giving him expertise none of the other Marines possessed. "The mother is weak but stable. The puppies are strong enough to travel if we're careful, but sir." He hesitated, then continued, "Where exactly are we going to take them?" It was a question Marcus hadn't fully considered. Military bases had strict regulations about animals, and bringing stray dogs back to their forward operating base could result in serious disciplinary action. But leaving them here meant certain death for the puppies and probably for their injured mother as well. We'll figure that out later, Marcus decided. Right now, let's just focus on getting them somewhere safe. Using his field pack, Marcus created a makeshift carrier for the puppies while Martinez helped the mother dog to her feet. She was wobbly and clearly in pain from her injuries, but her maternal instincts drove her to follow wherever her babies went. The sight of the proud German shepherd limping along behind Marcus, trusting him completely with her most precious possessions, was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The journey back to their patrol route took twice as long as it should have, with Marcus and Martinez taking turns carrying the puppy-filled pack, while the mother dog struggled to keep up on her injured legs. The other squad members maintained tight security, their professionalism evident despite their obvious confusion about their sergeant's unprecedented decision. As they finally reached their extraction point, Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Alpha Team, this is base. What's your status? You're 40 minutes overdue for check-in." Marcus exchanged glances with Jenkins, who shook his head slightly. They both knew that explaining their delay would open a conversation neither wanted to have over unsecured radio channels. "Base, this is Alpha Team Leader. We encountered some obstacles but are proceeding to extraction point. ETA 15 minutes. "Copy that, Alpha Team. Command wants to debrief you immediately upon return." The helicopter ride back to base was surreal. The German shepherd lay quietly on the floor of the aircraft, her puppies nestled against her as the rotors thundered overhead. Other Marines on the helicopter stared in bewilderment, but none asked questions. Marcus's reputation for unconventional, but effective leadership had earned him enough respect that his men trusted his judgment, even when they didn't understand it. Back at Forward Operating Base Chapman, Marcus faced the inevitable confrontation with his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Harrison. She was a career Marine who'd worked her way up through the ranks, earning respect through competence and fairness rather than politics. Marcus respected her greatly, which made the upcoming conversation even more difficult. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, explain to me why my patrol squad returned with a German shepherd and 5 puppies," Colonel Harrison said without preamble, as Marcus stood at attention in her office. "Ma'am, we encountered the animal in distress during our patrol. She was trapped and giving birth. I made a decision to assist," Marcus replied, sticking to the facts. "You made a decision to deviate from your mission parameters, risk your men's safety, and bring unauthorized animals onto this base," Harrison corrected. "Do you understand the regulations you violated?" Marcus did understand completely. He also understood that he'd make the same decision again without hesitation. "Yes, ma'am. I take full responsibility for my actions." Colonel Harrison studied him for a long moment. She'd known Marcus for 2 years and had never seen him make a reckless decision. His squad had one of the best safety records in the battalion, and his men would follow him anywhere. This situation was completely out of character. "There's more to this story," she said finally. "What aren't you telling me?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the German military identification tag he'd removed from the dog's collar. He placed it on Harrison's desk and watched her expression change as she read it. "Klaus Weber, Bundeswehr," she read aloud. "German military? Rodriguez, where did you get this?" "The dog was wearing it, ma'am. She belonged to a German soldier." Harrison picked up her secure phone and dialed the liaison office. "This is Colonel Harrison. I need you to run a check on a German soldier named Klaus Weber. Obergefreiter identification number." She read the numbers from the tag. The conversation that followed was conducted in hushed tones, with Harrison's expression growing more serious with each passing minute. Finally, she hung up and looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. "Staff Sergeant Klaus Weber was killed in action 3 weeks ago. IED explosion during a convoy operation about 60 kilometers from where you found his dog." She paused, letting that information sink in. According to German records, his military working dog, a German shepherd named Greta, went missing during the same attack. They assumed she was killed. Marcus felt his knees go weak. The German shepherd, Greta, had been mourning her fallen handler while carrying his puppies. She'd somehow survived the explosion that killed Klaus Weber, made her way to that abandoned village and was preparing to give birth when the building collapsed on her. Sir, permission to speak freely? Marcus asked. Granted. That dog wasn't just some stray animal. She was a soldier's partner, his companion in this war. She survived an attack that killed her handler, managed to stay alive long enough to give birth to his puppies, and now she's here safe, because we happened to be in the right place at the right time. Harrison nodded slowly. The German liaison office wants to speak with you immediately. Apparently, Klaus Weber's family has been asking about Greta. His father served with German shepherds in the military for 30 years. This dog meant everything to the Weber family. As Marcus prepared to make what would prove to be the most important phone call of his life, neither he nor Colonel Harrison could possibly imagine the extraordinary connection that was about to be revealed. The story of Klaus Weber and his dog Greta was far more complicated and meaningful than anyone realized, and Marcus's act of compassion had set in motion a chain of events that would transform multiple lives across 2 continents. The phone call to Germany would reveal a twist so unexpected, so profound, that it would make international news and forever change Marcus's understanding of fate, destiny, and the invisible threads that connect all living beings. The secure video conference with Germany took place in Colonel Harrison's office 3 hours later. On the screen appeared a man in his 50s wearing a German military uniform, his weathered face marked by the kind of grief that only comes from losing a child. Beside him sat an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded Marcus immediately of the German shepherd he'd rescued. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the older man began in accented but clear English. I am Heinrich Weber, Klaus's grandfather. This is Major Franz Müller from the Bundeswehr Liaison Office. We cannot express our gratitude for what you have done. Marcus felt uncomfortable with their thanks. Sir, I just did what anyone would do. I'm sorry for your family's loss. Heinrich Weber's eyes filled with tears. You do not understand, young man. Greta was not just my grandson's working dog. She was family. Klaus raised her from a puppy after his own father died in a training accident 4 years ago. The old man paused, composing himself. Klaus had no wife, no children. Greta was his closest companion, and he wrote to us about her constantly. Major Müller leaned forward. Staff Sergeant, there are some details about Klaus Weber that we need to share with you. Details that make your rescue of Greta even more significant than you realize. The screen shifted to show military photographs, and Marcus found himself looking at images of a young German soldier who couldn't have been more than 25 years old. Klaus Weber had bright blue eyes and a warm smile, and in every photo, he was accompanied by a beautiful German shepherd that Marcus now recognized as Greta. Klaus was scheduled to return to Germany in 2 weeks. Major Müller continued. He had already made arrangements to bring Greta home with him. He'd found a small house near his grandfather's farm, and he was planning to breed German shepherds professionally after his military service ended. Heinrich Weber nodded. He called me the week before he died. He was so excited about Greta's pregnancy. He said the puppies would be the beginning of his new life back home. The old man's voice broke slightly. Now those puppies are the only part of my grandson that remains. The weight of this revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. These weren't just random puppies born in a war zone. They were the living legacy of a fallen soldier, the dreams and hopes of a young man who would never make it home. Marcus thought about his own plans after military service, his own dreams of a peaceful life, and realized how easily he could have been in Klaus Weber's place. There's something else, Major Müller said, his expression growing even more serious. We've been investigating the circumstances of Klaus's death, and we've discovered some troubling information. The convoy attack that killed him wasn't random. Our intelligence suggests it was specifically targeted because someone knew Klaus was transporting something valuable. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. What kind of valuable cargo? Not cargo, Heinrich Weber interjected. Information. Klaus had been working undercover, gathering intelligence about a drug trafficking network that was funding insurgent activities. He was scheduled to deliver critical information to coalition forces the day he was killed. Marcus felt his heart racing. Sir, are you saying that Klaus Weber was murdered specifically because of his intelligence work? We believe so, Major Müller confirmed. The timing was too perfect and the attack was too precise. Someone wanted to stop Klaus from delivering what he knew. The implications were staggering. Greta hadn't just lost her handler in a random act of war. She'd witnessed the assassination of her partner by people who were willing to kill to protect their secrets. She'd somehow survived the attack and managed to stay hidden for weeks while carrying Klaus's puppies. But how did she end up in that village where we found her? Marcus asked. Heinrich Weber smiled sadly. Klaus wrote about a local family in that village who had befriended him. An old man named Abdul Rahman and his granddaughter Fatima. Klaus had been teaching them English, and they had been helping Greta when she needed medical care during her pregnancy. The pieces were starting to come together in Marcus's mind. The abandoned village, the collapsed building, the fact that Greta had been relatively clean and well-fed despite being on her own for weeks. She hadn't been truly abandoned. Someone had been caring for her until very recently. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Major Muller said, "We need to ask you something very important. When you found Greta, was there any sign of the local family? Any indication of what might have happened to them?" Marcus thought back to that day, remembering the eerie silence of the village, the way the streets had been completely empty. "No, sir. The village was deserted. It looked like people had left recently, but there was no sign of violence." "That's actually good news," Heinrich Weber said with relief. "It means they probably fled when they heard about Klaus's death. They knew that anyone associated with him might be in danger." Over the next hour, the full scope of the situation became clear. Klaus Weber hadn't just been a soldier. He'd been working on one of the most important intelligence operations in the region. His death had set back coalition efforts significantly, but now there was hope that Greta and her puppies might provide some kind of closure for his family, and perhaps even help with the ongoing investigation. "We have a request," Heinrich Weber said as the conversation neared its end. "Would it be possible for you to escort Greta and her puppies to Germany? I know it's highly unusual, but my grandson trusted that dog with his life, and now I want to trust you with hers." Colonel Harrison spoke up before Marcus could respond. "Mr. Weber, that would require approval from the highest levels of command. The logistics alone would be incredibly complex." "I understand," the elderly German replied, "but Staff Sergeant Rodriguez risked his life and his career to save these animals. He's already shown the kind of character and dedication that my grandson would have respected. I believe Klaus would want this man to be the one to bring his dog home." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the responsibility being placed on his shoulders. Just that morning, he'd been a regular Marine on a routine patrol. Now he was being asked to become the guardian of a fallen soldier's legacy, to shepherd these innocent puppies across continents to their new home. "Sir," Marcus said to Heinrich Weber, "if command approves it, I would be honored to bring Greta and the puppies to Germany." What none of them knew at that moment was that the approval process would uncover even more shocking revelations about Klaus Weber's true identity and his connection to Marcus Rodriguez, a connection that would prove to be far more than mere coincidence. The investigation into Klaus's death would also lead to discoveries that would make this rescue mission one of the most significant intelligence operations of the entire war, with consequences reaching far beyond what anyone could possibly imagine. The approval process for transporting Greta and her puppies to Germany took 3 weeks, during which time Marcus found himself caring for the animals in a makeshift kennel behind the base medical facility. What started as a temporary arrangement had become a daily routine that provided him with an unexpected source of comfort and purpose in the harsh environment of deployment. Every morning before dawn, Marcus would check on Greta and her rapidly growing puppies. The mother dog had recovered remarkably well from her injuries, but she remained cautious around everyone except Marcus and Martinez. It was as if she understood that these 2 Marines were responsible for saving her life and the lives of her children. During these quiet morning visits, Marcus found himself talking to Greta about Klaus Weber, sharing what he'd learned about her fallen handler from the extensive background investigation that had been conducted. The more he learned about Klaus, the more he felt a strange connection to the young German soldier he'd never met. Klaus Weber had grown up in a small Bavarian town called Garmisch-Partenkirchen, raised by his grandfather Heinrich after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12 years old. Like Marcus, Klaus had been drawn to military service by a sense of duty and a desire to make a difference in the world. Like Marcus, he'd been deployed to Afghanistan with high ideals that had been tempered by the harsh realities of war. The parallels in their lives were striking, but what truly amazed Marcus were the details he discovered about Klaus's intelligence work. The German soldier had been investigating the same drug trafficking network that had killed 3 members of Marcus's own unit in a roadside bombing 6 months earlier. Klaus Weber had been working to avenge American soldiers Marcus had considered brothers. As the approval process dragged on, Marcus received an unexpected call from Heinrich Weber. The old man's voice sounded different, more urgent than before. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, I need to share something with you that might sound impossible to believe," Heinrich began. "I've been researching your background as part of the approval process, and I've discovered something extraordinary." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Background investigations could uncover all sorts of personal information, and he wasn't sure what Klaus's grandfather might have found. "Sir, I'm not sure what you mean. Your grandmother's maiden name was Rodriguez Gutierrez, correct? And she emigrated to Texas from Mexico in 1943? "Yes, sir, that's correct. But I don't understand what this has to do with anything." Heinrich Weber's voice became emotional. "Staff Sergeant, my late wife was Maria Gutierrez Weber. She emigrated from Mexico to Germany in 1942, during World War II. She was fleeing the same village that your grandmother left, a small town called San Miguel de Allende." Marcus felt the world spinning around him. "Sir, are you saying—" "I'm saying that your grandmother and my wife were sisters. You and Klaus Weber were cousins, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. You are family." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. All this time he'd been caring for the dog and puppies of a man who was his own blood relative. The strange sense of connection he'd felt, the inexplicable drive to risk everything for Greta. It all suddenly made sense in a way that defied logical explanation. "How is that possible?" Marcus whispered into the phone. "How did we end up here in this situation?" "I don't know," Heinrich admitted. "But I believe my grandson somehow led you to Greta. Klaus wrote to me about dreams he'd been having in the weeks before he died. He dreamed about a Marine who looked like him, who would find Greta if anything happened to him. I thought it was just war stress, but now—" Marcus thought about his own dreams during deployment, the recurring nightmares about German shepherds and faceless soldiers calling for help. Dreams he'd dismissed as combat stress now took on an entirely different meaning. The background investigation had also uncovered other remarkable coincidences. Klaus Weber had graduated from military training on the exact same day Marcus had been promoted to staff sergeant. Both men had requested deployment to Afghanistan specifically to work with intelligence units. Both had written letters to their families expressing concerns about drug trafficking networks operating in their areas of operation. "There's something else," Heinrich continued. Klaus left detailed journals about his intelligence work, including names and locations of network members. The German military has shared this information with coalition forces, and it directly relates to the people who killed your unit members 6 months ago. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. This mission was no longer just about rescuing animals. It was about completing the work his cousin had died for, about bringing justice to the people who had killed soldiers from both their units. "Mr. Weber, I need to ask you something important. Did Klaus ever mention having dreams about American Marines?" There was a long pause before Heinrich answered. "Yes, he did. He wrote about dreaming of a Marine who looked like family, who would carry on his mission if he couldn't complete it. Staff Sergeant, I believe you were meant to find Greta. I believe Klaus somehow arranged this from beyond the grave." The conversation continued for another hour, with Heinrich sharing more details about Klaus's work and his growing conviction that Marcus was destined to complete what his cousin had started. By the time they ended the call, Marcus understood that his mission had expanded far beyond transporting animals to Germany. Colonel Harrison called Marcus to her office that afternoon with news about the approval process. "Staff Sergeant, I've just received word from the Pentagon. Your transport mission has been approved, but with additional conditions. You'll be escorting the animals to Germany as part of a joint intelligence operation with German forces." "Ma'am, what kind of intelligence operation?" Klaus Weber's journals have provided breakthrough information about the trafficking network. The Germans want you to work with their intelligence officers to follow up on leads your cousin identified before his death. This isn't just a rescue mission anymore, Rodriguez. This is an opportunity to complete the most important intelligence operation in this theater. As Marcus left Colonel Harrison's office, Greta was waiting for him outside, her 5 healthy puppies playing around her feet. She looked up at him with those intelligent brown eyes, and Marcus could swear he saw Klaus Weber's spirit looking back at him. The mission to Germany would prove to be just the beginning of an adventure that would take Marcus across Europe, following clues left by his deceased cousin, and ultimately leading him to discoveries that would change the course of the war and reveal family secrets that had been hidden for over 70 years. The jaw-dropping twist that awaited him in Germany would prove that some connections transcend death itself, and that acts of compassion. The flight to Germany took 18 hours, with stops in Kuwait and Frankfurt. Marcus traveled in civilian clothes, officially listed as a military liaison escorting diplomatic cargo. Greta and her 5 puppies rode in a specially designed transport crate in the aircraft's climate-controlled cargo hold, with Marcus checking on them during each refueling stop. Landing at Munich airport, Marcus was met by a delegation that surprised him with its size and importance. Along with Heinrich Weber stood Major Müller, 2 other German intelligence officers, and a woman in her 30s who bore a striking resemblance to Klaus Weber. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Heinrich said warmly, embracing Marcus like family. I want you to meet my granddaughter, Dr. Anna Weber, Klaus's younger sister. Anna Weber stepped forward, her blue eyes filled with tears as she shook Marcus's hand. My brother wrote about having strange dreams before he died. Dreams about meeting family he'd never known. When grandfather told me about you, about what you did for Greta, I knew those dreams meant something. The reunion between Greta and the Weber family was emotional beyond words. The German shepherd seemed to recognize Heinrich immediately, her tail wagging as she allowed the elderly man to pet her and examine her puppies. It was clear that Klaus had brought Greta to visit his grandfather during previous leaves from military service. She remembers me, Heinrich said with wonder. Look how she trusts me with her babies. Klaus trained her well. The drive to Heinrich's farm took them through the Bavarian countryside, past rolling green hills and picture-perfect villages that seemed untouched by war. Marcus found himself thinking about Klaus Weber, imagining his cousin traveling these same roads as a child, dreaming of the peaceful life he'd planned to return to after his deployment. Heinrich's farm was a modest property with a traditional German farmhouse and several outbuildings that had been converted into kennels for breeding German shepherds. As soon as Greta saw the familiar surroundings, she became animated in a way Marcus hadn't seen since rescuing her. This was home, the place Klaus had prepared for her return. Klaus spent his last leave here, building these kennels specifically for Greta and her future puppies, Anna explained as they toured the facilities. He had everything planned out, breeding schedules, training programs, even names picked out for the puppies. That evening, over dinner in Heinrich's kitchen, the family shared stories about Klaus that painted a picture of a young man remarkably similar to Marcus. Klaus had been idealistic but practical, brave but thoughtful, driven by a desire to protect others rather than seek glory for himself. He wrote to us about the American soldiers he'd met in Afghanistan, Heinrich said. He had great respect for the Marines especially. He said they reminded him of old-fashioned knights, willing to die for principles most people had forgotten. Dr. Anna Weber, who worked as a forensic psychologist for the German police, had been studying Klaus's journals and letters for weeks. Marcus, may I call you Marcus? There are patterns in my brother's writing that suggest he was experiencing something beyond normal combat stress. He wrote repeatedly about feeling connected to someone he'd never met, someone who would understand his mission. The conversation was interrupted by a phone call from Major Müller. Heinrich answered and spoke in rapid German for several minutes before hanging up with a grim expression. There have been developments in the investigation into Klaus's death, Heinrich announced. The intelligence he gathered has led to arrests in 3 countries, but there's also disturbing news. The trafficking network has put a bounty on anyone connected to Klaus's intelligence work. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Sir, what does that mean for your family? It means we're all in danger, Anna said simply. But it also means Klaus's work was even more important than we realized. The network he was investigating reaches into the highest levels of government and military in several nations. Major Müller arrived at the farm an hour later with 2 other intelligence officers and a file folder thick with documents. Sergeant Rodriguez, we need your help to follow up on intelligence leads that Klaus identified in his final reports. The network knows we have his journals, so they're moving quickly to eliminate evidence and witnesses. The briefing that followed revealed the scope of Klaus Weber's investigation. He hadn't just been tracking traffickers, he'd uncovered a sophisticated network that was using drug money to fund terrorist operations across Europe and the Middle East. The network included corrupt officials in multiple NATO countries, making it impossible to know who could be trusted. Klaus identified a key meeting location in Switzerland where network leaders gather monthly, Major Muller explained. His final report mentioned intercepting communications about a major operation planned for next month, but he died before he could gather specific details. Marcus studied the maps and photographs Klaus had compiled. His cousin's handwriting filled the margins with notes and observations that showed incredible attention to detail and genuine concern for the lives that would be lost if the network succeeded in their plans. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus asked. Klaus established a cover identity as a dog breeder attending European breeding shows, Anna explained. He used Greta as his credentials to gain access to wealthy collectors who were actually network financiers. With his death, that cover is blown, but you could potentially take his place. The plan was audacious and dangerous. Marcus would assume Klaus's identity as a German shepherd breeder, using Greta and her puppies as his credentials to infiltrate the network's next gathering in Switzerland. His American accent would be explained as the result of growing up abroad, a story Klaus had already established in his cover legend. "The risk is enormous," Major Mueller warned. "These people have already killed Klaus and probably the Afghan family that helped him. If they discover who you really are, your life won't be worth anything." Marcus looked out the window at Greta playing with her puppies in Heinrich's yard. The German shepherd mother was finally home, safe with her babies in the place Klaus had prepared for them. But Klaus's mission remained unfinished, and the people responsible for his death were still free to kill others. "I'll do it," Marcus decided. "Klaus was my cousin even though we never knew each other. He died fighting people who killed my brothers in arms. This isn't just about completing his mission, it's about family." Heinrich Weber smiled with pride and sadness. Klaus would be honored to know that his American cousin is willing to finish what he started. "But Marcus, there's something else you need to know. Something we haven't told you yet about your family connection to Klaus." Anna nodded. "When we researched your grandmother's background, we discovered that she didn't just emigrate from Mexico randomly. She was fleeing something specific, something that connects your family to this network in ways you can't imagine." The revelation that was about to unfold would prove that Marcus's rescue of Greta had been orchestrated by forces beyond human understanding, and that his family's history was intertwined with the very criminals Klaus had died fighting. The mission to Switzerland would become not just an intelligence operation, but a reckoning with family secrets that had been hidden for 3 generations, secrets that would explain why Marcus had been drawn to that collapsed building in Afghanistan at the exact moment when Greta needed him most. Heinrich Weber led Marcus to his study, a room filled with old photographs, military medals, and documents dating back decades. On the desk sat an ornate wooden box that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. With trembling hands, the elderly man lifted the lid and removed a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon. "These are letters from your grandmother to my wife during World War II, Heinrich began. "They reveal a story that our families have kept secret for over 70 years. Marcus watched as Heinrich carefully unfolded the first letter, written in Spanish on paper yellowed with age. Anna translated as her grandfather read aloud. "My dearest sister Maria, I pray this letter reaches you safely in Germany. The man you warned me about has found me here in San Miguel. Don Carlos has discovered what father did during the revolution, and he swears he will have revenge on our entire family. I must flee to America immediately. Take care of yourself and remember that our father died a hero, no matter what lies they tell about him." Marcus felt his world shifting as the implications became clear. What did our great-grandfather do? Heinrich opened another box and withdrew a faded photograph, showing a man in Revolutionary-era Mexican clothing, standing beside a younger man in a German military uniform. "Your great-grandfather, Carlos Gutierrez, was a Mexican revolutionary who helped German intelligence agents during World War I. He provided safe passage for German operatives traveling between Mexico and the United States." Anna continued the story. "When the war ended, Carlos was hunted by various groups who considered him a traitor. He managed to protect his family for years, but eventually his enemies found him. Your grandmother and my grandmother fled to different continents to escape revenge that was promised against all of Carlos's descendants. Don Carlos, Heinrich said with disgust, was the grandfather of the man who now leads the trafficking network Klaus was investigating, Carlos Mendoza Herrera. He's been hunting our families for 3 generations, believing we possess information about hidden German gold that was supposedly entrusted to our great-grandfather. Marcus stared at the photograph of his great-grandfather, seeing family resemblance in the man's eyes and jawline. Are you saying that Klaus was killed because of something that happened over 100 years ago? We believe so, Anna confirmed. Klaus's cover as a dog breeder gave him access to wealthy collectors, but what he discovered was that many of these collectors were descendants of families involved in historical treasure hunting. They're not just running drugs for money, they're searching for lost war treasure using drug profits to fund their operations. The final piece of the puzzle came from Klaus's last journal entry, which Heinrich had saved for this moment. Anna read Klaus's words aloud. I have confirmed that the network is led by descendants of the Mexican families who hunted our great-grandfather. They believe the Gutierrez family still possesses maps or information about German gold hidden in Mexico during World War I. My cover is compromised, but I have discovered something extraordinary. There is an American Marine in Afghanistan who shares our family name Rodriguez. If something happens to me, Greta will lead this Marine to the truth. I have trained her to recognize the scent of our family bloodline. She will know him when she meets him. Marcus felt chills running down his spine as he remembered how immediately Greta had trusted him, how she'd seemed to recognize him despite never having met him before. Klaus had somehow prepared his dog to find Marcus in case his mission failed. Klaus was planning to fake his death, Heinrich explained. He was going to allow the network to think they'd killed him while he secretly gathered final evidence. But the IED explosion was real, and he died protecting information he'd never had the chance to pass on. The information Klaus had died protecting was hidden in a safe deposit box in Switzerland, accessible only by someone who could prove their family connection to Carlos Gutierrez. Klaus had been planning to retrieve it during the breeding show that Marcus would now attend in his place. The evidence in that box could destroy the entire network, Major Muller said. But it's also the location of the treasure they've been hunting for a century. Your great-grandfather really did hide German gold in Mexico, and he left instructions for his descendants to find it. Over the next week, Marcus underwent intensive training to assume Klaus's identity. He learned about German Shepherd breeding, memorized details about European dog shows, and studied photographs of network members Klaus had identified. Greta proved to be an invaluable partner, clearly understanding that she was helping to complete her fallen handler's mission. The breeding show in Geneva provided perfect cover for the operation. Marcus, traveling as Klaus Weber with documentation provided by German intelligence, presented Greta's puppies as prize specimens bred from champion bloodlines. The network members he needed to identify attended the show as wealthy collectors and breeders. On the second day of the show, Marcus was approached by an elderly man who introduced himself as Carlos Mendoza Herrera. He was in his 80s, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence and cruelty of someone who'd spent decades hunting enemies. You look familiar, young man, Mendoza Herrera said in accented English. Have we met before? I don't believe so, sir, Marcus replied, his heart pounding as he maintained Klaus's cover identity. I'm Klaus Weber from Bavaria. These are my dogs. The old man studied Greta carefully, and Marcus saw recognition dawn in his eyes. This is the dog that belonged to the German soldier we killed in Afghanistan. Which means you're not Klaus Weber at all. The confrontation that followed revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Mendoza Herrera had been using the trafficking network to fund a 70-year hunt for treasure that Carlos Gutierrez had hidden in the mountains of Mexico. He'd killed Klaus because the young German soldier had gotten too close to. Discovering the truth about the network's real purpose. Your family has cost me millions of dollars and decades of searching, the old man snarled. But now I have you, and you're going to tell me where your great-grandfather hid my gold. The final confrontation took place in a remote alpine lodge, where the network's leadership had gathered for their monthly meeting. Marcus, supported by German and Swiss intelligence agents, faced down the descendants of families who'd been feuding for 3 generations over treasure and revenge. In the end, it was Greta who provided the key to victory. Klaus had trained her to recognize a specific scent, the scent of fear and guilt that had marked the families responsible for hunting the Gutierrez descendants. When the shooting started, Greta led authorities directly to Mendoza Herrera's hiding place. The treasure was eventually found in Mexico, exactly where Carlos Gutierrez had hidden it during World War I. But more importantly, the network responsible for Klaus's death and countless other murders was finally destroyed. Marcus returned to Heinrich's farm with Greta and her puppies, who had grown strong and healthy during their weeks in Bavaria. The old man had decided that Marcus should keep one of the puppies, a female that looked exactly like her mother. Klaus would want his American cousin to have a piece of his legacy, Heinrich said, as they watched the puppies play in the yard. He believed family connections transcend death, and I think he's been proven right. As Marcus prepared to return to his unit in Afghanistan, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a simple act of compassion. By risking everything to save a pregnant dog, he'd uncovered family history, completed his cousin's mission, and helped bring justice to those who'd killed soldiers from both their units. The puppy he named Honor would accompany him back to Texas after his deployment, a living reminder that sometimes the most important missions are the ones we never see coming. Greta remained in Germany with Heinrich, finally safe in the home Klaus had prepared for her, surrounded by her puppies and the love of the family who understood her sacrifice. The official reports would never mention the supernatural elements of the story, Klaus's prophetic dreams, Greta's uncanny ability to find Marcus at the exact moment she needed rescue, or the way family connections had transcended death to bring justice to the living. But Marcus knew the truth, and he carried it with him as a reminder that heroism often comes disguised as simple kindness, and that the bonds of family can reach across continents and even beyond the grave to guide us toward our destiny.